Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I want to give you guys a bit of a breakdown as to why I generally have been playing degenerate aggro decks on ladder on my October Brawl account rather than what you guys pretty much very well know by now, my Jiraxxus Warlock. So what happened is I climbed to about rank 8 last month with the Jiraxxus Warlock, and basically what I was experiencing is that almost all of my losses were just, the super high roll aggro openers, which honestly there is no answer to that. That just happens. That's Hearthstone. But the other side of that was there's a lot of control decks on Wild, and if you're playing a Jiraxxus based deck, having half the starting health as your maximum, that's generally pretty terrible against combos. Now, I think that isn't my best deck for October Brawl because my opponents are almost incapable of playing combo decks because they just won't have the very specific, typically high rarity cards to play those decks. And while it's obviously my best deck on ladder, it just doesn't really work. And I wanted to kind of give you guys a bit of an understanding as to why there is such a big difference, especially for the typical player. Now, with most like tournament players, that's not really an issue. And in my opinion, that's a bit of a problem, but a typical player is going to encounter what I am encountering on my October Brawl account, and that is, well, in ladder, because you get reset every month, you have to grind out those games. You have to just, push the wins based on a timer as fast as possible. If you have a deck that finishes a game in 1/3 of the time as another deck, even if it's slightly worse, it'll probably ladder you up faster. And I know there's at certain breakpoints that's not exactly true, like if it's 49 versus 51 win rate, well, sure. But typically, behind a competent player, aggro decks have done about as well as control decks on ladder. And, some of these are like aggro combo in some cases, but the deck that wins as quickly as possible. That type of deck has dominated Hearthstone since Naxxramas was released. And that's pretty insane if you ask me. Basically, you have huge incentives to play aggro. Your win conditions are if your opponent doesn't have immediate answers to your plays, they lose. It doesn't really matter what cards they might have in their deck. You're only dealing with the top 7 or 8 cards at best if you're playing a decent aggro deck. So you can win against absolutely everything. If you tried playing control, well, you absolutely cannot win against combo decks, and it's very difficult to win against stronger control decks. There's like a control deck hierarchy. Well, with aggro, weaker aggro decks can beat stronger aggro decks because the opening hand just is that significant. So if you play an aggressive deck, you can just beat anyone. It might require more luck in some cases, but you can beat anyone. And the fact that you just churn out these games again and again gives you really quick practice on a deck that's, compared to a control deck, a lot easier to master. Now, there's some debate to that. I won't get into that, but I think in terms of mastering these decks, not just learning the basic in and outs, aggro is a lot easier to master than control. And yes, basically what we end up having, because of the structure of the ladder system and because aggro decks are about as good as control decks, we have a fairly aggro-ridden game. And yeah, there are a few things that put stopping power to that, but because the balance is usually more than 50% aggro, less than 50% other, what ends up happening is a lot of these games are very one-dimensional. Because if one player is playing aggro, if both players are playing aggro, it's just a clown fest. But if one player is aggro, the other player is playing control or combo or whatever, again, you're only dealing with the top 7 or 8 cards. And yeah, that's an advantage if you want to play as a new player, but I thought, why not just make some control cards that can be lower rarity, so newer players can attempt to play control decks as well. Kind of what they did with Cthulhu, really. I think that was very well designed, but that's long gone now. In terms of tournament decks, it is quite a bit different. As I mentioned, you really need to understand what your opponents are likely to be bringing to the table, and playing into that is much more important. So in my October Brawl case, easily my best tournament deck, the Jiraxis Warlock, which you've seen in many videos by now. And when you compare it to the ladder deck, the deck that I've been using, I almost made it to rank 6 last month, if you're curious, with the Face Hunter. I mean, it's an aggressive hunter. I guess it's not a Face Hunter because it doesn't have that many charge things. But I like considered it, but it was immediately written off that that hunter is not good enough to play in that tournament. It's not good enough because everyone else is playing aggressive to maybe mid-range decks, and a few that aren't are playing heavy controls when they have the power cards like the heavy heals. In any of those cases, that hunter deck is not particularly likely to do very well. So it is interesting. It is interesting when you have extra factors that change this dynamic. When the dynamic between tournament play and ladder play is different, it's actually pretty interesting and quite a lot of fun. And I thought I'd mention that because I think there hasn't been too much of a separation between the two as of late. So let me know what you think. Hope you guys tune in this Friday for week 4 of October Brawl. And we'll see what we come up with until then. I'll see you guys tomorrow.